Hey, are you here? Everybody is equipped to follow the discussion. I will do it in French. It's not sure that you are ready. Ok. Bon, je m'appelle Anas Hasnaoui. Je suis membre qui représente l'espace associatif du Maroc. L'espace associatif est également membre de l'ANND, le réseau des ONG pour le développement, le réseau arabe pour les ONG de développement. INND, Arab NGOs Network for Development. J'aimerais commencer par rappeler un petit peu, nous rappeler tous que Nairobi a constitué pour nous tous ici présents un moment dans le processus, dans l'évolution de l'efficacité de développement et qui a marqué particulièrement une nouvelle étape dans ce processus depuis Busan. Il faut dire que cela est dû essentiellement à notre capacité à être solidaire, à combattre pour pouvoir arriver à cette étape-là. C'est également, et il faut leur rendre hommage ici, bien sûr, au gouvernement kenyan et à son leadership lors de Nairobi, où le gouvernement, bien sûr, a pu être le leader des négociations qui ont abouti aux résultats que vous nous connaissez tous. Je tiens bien sûr, au nom du CPDE, à féliciter le gouvernement kenyan et en particulier le représentant aussi présent avec nous du gouvernement kenyan, M. Collins Aleska. Monsieur Collins Aleska interviendra ici en tant que représentant en qualité de technicien officer de l'aide pour l'efficacité du développement et interviendra bien sûr particulièrement au nom du secrétariat national du Trésor. Il est également, ou il a été, un des activistes les plus impliqués dans le processus en termes d'organisation de la conférence de haut niveau, mais également de la rédaction du draft de NOD, ce que nous appelons aujourd'hui les documents finaux de Nairobi. Je le remercie pour avoir accepté notre invitation. Nous avons venons également du Kenya, mais cette fois-ci nous représentant sa personne. Et j'ai le plaisir de souhaiter la bienvenue aux membres dynamiques, mais de manière très discrète, mon ami MEJA, et qui a joué un très grand rôle dans l'organisation notamment de forums des associations de la société civile, de plus de 500 associations de la société civile, pour pouvoir mener un travail essentiellement dans l'universalisation de l'efficacité du développement. MEJA est également ici en tant que directeur de Reality of Aid, Réalité pour l'aide d'Afrique. Il est également membre du comité de coordination du CPDE. Parmi nous également, Madame BEVERLY, LONGID, you prefer LONGID. Elle est représentative de Indigenous People's Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation. Là, comme vous pouvez le constater, elle nous donne toute la légitimité de porter notre principe de genre et de respect du genre. Elle est la seule parmi nous dans cet atelier. Je la remercie également pour sa participation. Bien sûr, comme vous le savez tous, le document final de Nairobi a été un moment où nous avons réalisé un certain nombre d'avancées. Mais également, il a continué à renforcer le paradoxe selon lequel autant il y a un travail pour créer un espace et un environnement favorable pour l'action de la société civile et renforcer et reconnaître les acteurs de la société civile comme acteurs incontournables dans le processus de l'efficacité de développement. Parallèlement, il y a eu un changement, et un changement pratiquement très visible, celui d'abord du renforcement de la place du secteur privé comme étant le leader qui a la responsabilité pour aller vers les objectifs de développement du millénaire, les objectifs de développement durable et l'agenda 2030, avec tout ce que là suppose en termes d'environnement favorable pour le secteur privé, en termes d'incitation fiscale et d'incitation financière. Ceci se fait bien sûr au détriment, bien sûr, de la place à jouer par les autres acteurs. Pour ce constat, qui a été relevé également par le CPDE dans son analyse de l'ensemble du document final, nous interpelle tous. Mais en particulier, il faudra rappeler que aujourd'hui, et parmi les objectifs que nous souhaitons, c'est pouvoir refléter un peu non seulement les résultats de cette rencontre, mais aller au-delà par l'interrogation des engagements des uns et des autres en termes d'implémentation essentiellement des engagements des uns et des autres, notamment de la société civile. Et pour pouvoir nous mettre un peu dans le bain de tout cela, je vais le faire en deux temps. D'abord en posant une première question sur ce qui a été fait durant Nairobi et de manière générale l'essentiel ou les points forts de cette rencontre. Et dans un deuxième temps, je donnerai une deuxième question, une deuxième possibilité pour donner quelles sont les perspectives que chacun de nos panélistes voit en termes d'implémentation. Et je commence tout de suite par donner la parole à notre ami Collins pour nous éclairer sur ce qui a été fait durant et surtout quel a été le point fort que vous avez identifié dans le travail qui a été fait à Nairobi. Merci.
Thank you very much, Anas. From Nairobi, actually this document came out, the Nairobi outcome document. It came out after extensive consultations among the GPEDC stakeholders, and the discussions went on for a period of about a year. We must say, as Government of Kenya, we are very appreciative to the CPDE for the role you played in pushing forward the document. There was a lot of consultation, a lot of movement by the side, but you really helped us in steering the document to its final conclusion. And also, I must say that for that reason, a lot of commitments on civil society were well captured. You will notice that Istanbul principles are scattered all over. I mean, the mention and there's particular commitments on what needs to be done. And so I must say that you helped us a lot in steering the ship. As I move forward to respond to the question, I have to say that the document is readily available. I have a copy with me. I didn't carry many. This is how it looks like, but if you go to the GPEDC website, then you can easily access it. The whole of it is available, and even the summarized part is also available. I think also it's available in other languages, probably French. I'm not sure of any other, and Spanish. Well, I have to mention that the Nairobi outcome document captures the vision for the global partnership contribution in realizing the 2030 agenda. The document has diverse commitments to different stakeholders, although they are all shared, but we tried as much as possible to ensure that each of the particular groups, each of the constituencies have commitments that they will follow, so that at the end of it, or after periods of time, we are able to assess and know how much progress has been made, and if there are any corrective actions that need to be taken. Now, I have to say that the main thing that the Nairobi outcome document did was to position the GPDC in the 2030 agenda, whereas the SDGs talk about the what, the Nairobi outcome document talks about the how, particularly for how partnerships, global partnerships in development should be done. So the Nairobi outcome document really succeeded in positioning the development cooperation agenda within the SDGs. So we hope that moving forward we'll be able to follow up with different commitments by different stakeholders in realizing the 2030 agenda through the global partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. But I will ask you the second question immediately because je vais vous poser la deuxième question parce que apparemment notre ami MEJA préfère faire une lecture d'ensemble. Alors, qu'est-ce qui se fait maintenant, aujourd'hui, par rapport à ce document et par rapport aux résultats issus de ce document?
Well, there are several things we are doing as a government of Kenya. Some are touching on global stakeholders, like all of us here, whereas some are really domesticated. So I'll start with what is global. And we are in the initial stages of starting to conceptualize the youth empowerment agenda. For those who participated in session 5 on youth and women economic empowerment, you must have heard of the youth empowerment indicator. We are looking at having that in future monitoring rounds. Just like we have indicator 8 on gender empowerment, we would also like to have a youth empowerment indicator. So as government of Kenya, being that that is the topic that we proposed to be, led by the host, the topic on youth and women empowerment, we are also leading in the drafting, the very, very initial discussions, very, very initial design of this indicator. And in doing so, we have come together as different stakeholders, government, civil society, the private sector, and others to ensure that this indicator is all inclusive. Well, I have to say that we may have to do what the civil society did with indicator 2, because I'm informed you did a lot of consultations, and we will come back to you and consult on areas which we feel we need your support, but certainly we surely need your support. Another thing that we are doing now as a country is the issue of the unfinished business. Whereas, yes, we are talking about emphasizing more now on the 2030 agenda, there is the unfinished business from the Paris, from the Accra, from Busan, which really we don't want to sweep under the carpet. And yes, it is captured well in the outcome document, and therefore, as a country, again, we are domesticating those commitments to ensure that nothing is left behind. The third thing that we are doing, although now this we hope shall be led by the civil society, because the issue that comes up in a lot of discussions with the other development cooperation stakeholders, well, the issue of the Istanbul principles, not many people understand them on the ground. And we want to believe that, just like our brother from Burundi mentioned in the morning, we could have opportunities to build the capacity of different stakeholders, so that, first of all, there is awareness, and then there is the uptake, and then there is the implementation of these principles. I'm sure if we went that way, then everyone will move together with us. As it is now, we don't have much. Knowledge about the Istanbul principles, especially at the wider national level and even the subnational level. If there is something else, I'll add on. Thank you.
Thank you. Justement, pour parler de l'implémentation des principes d'Istanbul, l'élargissement de la connaissance et le rayonnement autour de ces principes, il y a lieu également de s'interroger sur quelles ont été les lectures faites de ce résultat, qui est le document final de Nairobi, les résultats du déroulement du processus de négociation, c'est-à-dire selon les associations de la société civile, à partir de la perspective des organisations de la société civile. Je pense que MEJA peut nous éclairer, d'abord en tant qu'acteur dynamique au niveau de ce processus, et particulièrement vu son implication dans l'organisation du forum et comme partie prenante des négociations.
Well, they say power corrupts, but PowerPoint corrupts more. So I apologize for what I'm about to do. And I'm good. Well, I don't want to take a lot of time. So because we are saying Nairobi has implications for us. And I'd like to ask my colleague to move to slide number 9, not 8. Now, Nairobi had a bit of a mixed bag for us and has serious implications for us. Now, just to add on some of what the colleague has said, what we see as major achievements out of Nairobi, apart from seeking to align the global partnership, locating global partnership into the 2030 agenda, is that for the first time since we started these discussions on effectiveness, we've agreed on a need to develop a work plan, a time-bound work plan, with which we'll be able to hold governments accountable, particularly on the aid effectiveness principles, where, as you know, most developing countries have made part of all the obligations, or most of them, and development partners or donors have failed to meet the obligation. As you know, without enabling environment for civil society, there is no CSO effectiveness. I repeat again, without enabling environment for CSOs, there will never be CSO effectiveness. And Nairobi recommits to reverse the trends and indeed work with the civil society organizations and other partners to create enabling environment for CSOs. The third achievement that we think we've done is that global partnership is a multi-stakeholder partnership. There are very many stakeholders, and in fact, in all its form, including its leadership structure, it really must embrace the multi-stakeholderness. And indeed, there is an understanding that there will be a co-chair, which is non-executive, to also be able to mobilize those non-executives to bring their efforts to bear on the implementations of the Nairobi commitment. So those are the three main things that I wanted to highlight. Then I'll move to the next slide, where I think this is where we find ourselves. In Paris, we were observers. In Accra, we were recognized. Doesn't mean that we sat into the room, but our presence was recognized. In Busan, yes, we were around the table, but they only promised to work on enabling environment, to improve our enabling environments. But when it came to the details on who and where and what, that was never there. Now Nairobi goes further, and this is what it says. We recognize the essential role of civil society as an independent, as an independent actor on its own right, working within national policies and towards effective development cooperation, poverty reduction, tackling inequality, and ensuring progress towards SDGs and 2030 agenda. We note that this role can be expressed in a number of ways, including through advocacy and communication, service delivery, monitoring, and research. We also recognize that civil society organizations are a significant means through which citizens can exercise their right to participate in development. You can find this in para 6, para 66. So indeed, with regard to recognizing how we express our mandate as civil society, Nairobi has provided that clarity. And there will be no debate about whether you are humanitarian or you are an activist. It doesn't matter. Nairobi guarantees that government must provide enabling environment for each and every actor in the civil society sphere. Which then means that with all this recognition comes responsibility. So unlike Busan, where we talked about para 22 restricting to Istanbul principles to para 22, to CSOs, now with regard to Nairobi, the Istanbul principles are part and parcel of the outcome, and in that regard, other stakeholders, including governments, will hold us accountable to what we've committed ourselves to. And I just wanted to highlight a few of those that we will have to really seek to implement, and I think most of them, we actually know them already. The first one, and see, I had a very interesting debate here in the morning of proliferation of standards and whatever. At the end of the day, they'll have to be aligned in the context of Istanbul principles. So you can domesticate them in whichever way you want, but in terms of aligning them to principles, that is very clear. So the first commitment we've made is we must adhere to the Istanbul principle as relevant to ensuring country-level ownership in our initiatives, including participation, empowerment, and pursuit of equitable partnership. We will accelerate efforts to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of women through development programs grounded in country priorities, recognizing that gender equality and women's empowerment are critical to achieving development results. We will embody gender equality and equity while promoting girls' rights, and promote and practice development cooperation that embodies gender equity. We will support the empowerment and inclusive participation of people to expand their democratic ownership over policies and development initiatives that affect their lives, with an emphasis on the poor and the marginalized. Now, this is a bit controversial, the next thing that I'm about to say, that we will be guided by national resource framework in the execution of our work as relevant to our roles as independent development partners in our own right. So we will be guided by national resource framework. So what that means, we are yet to interpret and understand. Maybe my colleague Collins will help us there. But we also committed to develop and implement priorities and approaches that promote environmental sustainability for present and future generations, including urgent responses to climate crisis, with specific attention to socio-economic, cultural, and indigenous conditions, ecological integrity, and justice. We will enhance our ways of learning from our experience, from other CSOs and development actors, integrating this evidence from development practice and results, including knowledge and wisdom of local and indigenous communities. So in essence, lastly, which I want to raise also is that we will have to demonstrate a sustainable organizational commitment to transparency, mutual accountability, and integrity in our internal operations. And we will realize sustainable outcomes and impacts of our development actions, focusing on results and conditions for lasting change for people. So I think these are what we've committed ourselves to in Nairobi. So in essence, Istanbul principles are not just principles developed for CSO alone. They now reflect the accountability mechanisms. They now reflect the accountability frameworks through which governments and other development cooperation partners will hold us to account. I thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, MEJA. I feel that before becoming observers, we were outsiders. And I'm afraid that the situation until now will make us again outsiders if there is no enabling environment. Je donne rapidement par rapport à cette question, par rapport à la question de l'engagement de la société civile. Il y a un certain nombre de principes sur lesquels nous avons travaillé, nous continuons à les revendiquer. Vous avez insisté sur la redevabilité, accountability, comme déterminant dans ces principes, non seulement par rapport à la société civile, mais par rapport à l'ensemble des acteurs. Je demande à mon ami Beverly Without Hills de venir avec des commentaires par rapport à cette question-là et par rapport à la question de la redevabilité au centre des préoccupations des organisations de la société civile et également par rapport aux autres acteurs.
Hello. Thank you, Anas. I think I would like to answer the question on what the Istanbul Principle means from the perspective of indigenous peoples, from mass movements or people's organizations. Because we've heard a lot since this morning that there are many actually existing documents in relation to accountability and transparency. One, I would look at it this way. No one will fight harder for accountability or transparency than those that suffer from its absence. So from the perspective of civil society, people's organizations, and mass movements, when we speak of Istanbul principles, these should be responsive to the situations where we find ourselves in. In the case of indigenous peoples, we always look at Istanbul principles that should be an expression of our right to self-determination. In other words, we live in a situation of land grabs and plunder. We live in a situation of neglect. We are in communities that are highly militarized. We are discriminated. We are misrepresented. So when we speak of accountability and transparency, it should be empowering. It should enhance us so that we'll be able to address this situation. Otherwise, the Istanbul Principles or 1,003 documents that we have that speaks on accountability and transparency will be useless. It would be meaningless. No? It will not serve its purpose. We've heard this morning that a lot of the speakers spoke on, are we accountable? And if yes, to whom are we accountable? If not, then why? Most of us already have spoken in relation to this. Accountability, I think, for CSOs, mass movements, and people's organizations should be very clear that our accountability is to our constituency. Our accountability is to the people that we serve. It is not because it is demanded by donors. It is not because it is demanded or required by government. So at least we should put that into framework. Probably the last point that I would like to stress is that CSOs, mass movements, and people's organizations have actually been practicing Istanbul principles. We have been speaking of partnerships and solidarity. We have been speaking of people's rights, human rights. We have been speaking of women's equality, representation of women and children. Probably it has not been systematized or called as Istanbul principles as such. But then because of our mandate to serve the people, to serve the interests of our constituency, those that are oppressed and exploited, we do practice the Istanbul principles. Last point. I hope you'll give me time because MEJA took a lot of time to lecture us with a PowerPoint. So I'll do it with extra time to speak. Probably, so accountability. So we might not call it as Istanbul. We can call it as Bangkok or Vietnam or Philippines or whatever. But the point is, what is important is how we practice it. It is not simply a question of walk the talk, but it's actually the commitment to do the principles and for whom. I think that is very, very important, because if we are not able to do that commitment and accountability to ourselves, then it would be very difficult for us to even hold the duty bearers, government, states, and private sectors to be accountable to the people. So that's the way I would answer accountability. Now, MEJA and Colin spoke about the Nairobi document. I think in terms of implementation, we should go beyond documents. We should go beyond the Istanbul principles, because as we implement it, as we do service to our constituency, we should be able to enhance the document. So in other words, this document should not be the end by itself. We should go beyond Nairobi document. We should go beyond Istanbul principles. If we need to enhance it, then we should enhance it. We should go beyond jargons. Probably we should also go beyond slogans. I think what's important is we're able to combine all of this into actions, not only to the issues and situations that we find ourselves in, but it should be able to capacitate us to engage also with governments, private sector, and other mechanisms and processes, always at the back of our mind, addressing the needs and benefits, welfare of the constituencies that we represent.
Thank you. Okay, I feel that you are sleeping. I hope that I will receive enough questions demonstrating that I'm not saying true.
Sorry, before you go to questions.
Yeah.
I have something else to add on, and I think the role of the GPIs, the global partnership initiatives.
Could you please keep it for at the end?
I just wanted to pick it up from what you say.
Yeah, I know.
And add it. Okay.
Right. بطبيعة الحال كل ما قلناه لحد الآن تم باللغتين الفرنسية والإنجليزية وأحيانا بالإسبانية، ولم يكن بوسع الجميع بطبيعة الحال أن ينصت إلى لغة أخرى. Did you understand anything? No. Je donne un petit espace de présence à la langue arabe. Vous avez compris quelque chose? Ceux qui n'ont pas encore entendu, I just give a space for Arab language to be present among us. So, je vais vous donner la parole. J'espère que vous allez bientôt réagir par rapport à ce qui a été dit. On donnera encore la parole à nos panélistes qui souhaitent poser une question, faire un commentaire. Question, comment? Yeah.
Thank you so much again. So I think I have a point to share with you in terms of the development of the implementation of the Nairobi outcome document, because many of you are aware here that there has been a change in the leadership of the GPEDC, and currently Bangladesh is one of the 3 co-chairs along with Uganda and Germany. So last month we had a meeting, in fact, including the officials from 3 countries as well as the colleagues from joint support team, meaning the UNDP and the OECD. So we are working on the draft action point, in fact, and Bangladesh is trying hard, in fact, to make sense of this outcome document, because as you all know that this document is a very big document and a lot of ambitions are there. So we need to pinpoint those things, and I think still the joint support team with inputs from the the countries, they are working on the draft, and this is a high time for you to get connected to the joint support team so that you can contribute to the work plan, because once the work plan is done, then it's very difficult for you to get into it. And the first steering committee meeting will be perhaps in the 3rd week on the margin of the bank fund meeting in Washington. So I think this is a great opportunity for the civil society organizations to share their feedback, in fact, and to, in fact, hold the new leadership to account. So this opportunity, this is the point I wanted to share. In fact, please don't miss this opportunity, because it is still in discussion, so grab this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. My first question, it goes to Colin. Thank you very much for raising that issue on the youth indicator. I just wanted to find out from you, maybe to say, since HLM2, what progress have we made in conceptualizing this, and also maybe what is the attitude of the different stakeholders that are involved in appreciating the need to actually have this indicator. And then my next question, it goes to MEJA. Thank you very much for articulating the issues around the enabling environment. And I think as civil society, this is where we work every day. So I just wanted to find out from you, maybe given the challenges that we currently have around enabling environment, what are maybe the new nuances or maybe practice that is emerging from civil society when it comes to being accountable, you know, in such contexts, which in some cases might actually be fragile contexts. Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants? Nobody? No? I'm surprised. Lots of you were among us in Nairobi.
Okay, mine is just a comment and possibly to reiterate a point that had been made by Aseka, where he alluded to the fact that for there to be effective implementation of the principles, we have to invest in awareness, uptake, and the eventual implementation of the principles. I think Aseka's view has already spoken to what should be happening on the governmental side of, you know, the implementation equation. And just to build on that, I would propose that for us in the non-governmental sector, there is an equal obligation for all of us to see effective implementation of these principles. And I believe that the starting point would be for us to domesticate these principles in our operational frameworks. We have constitutive instruments as organizations, by whatever name we may call them, constitution, you know, articles of association, or whatever. I think the first and most critical point of departure would be for us as individual organizations to find some space for the principles in those organizational documents, and possibly then to move beyond that by ensuring that we enhance awareness among our peers, and for them also to have, you know, an uptake of the principles.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Come in. You want?
Thank you so much. This is a comment. I believe that as CSOs, we have to look at our documentation as organizations so that we are able to interlink it with the principles, because if we do not sit down and review our documents and see how they interlink with the principles, then we will be going the wrong direction, in the sense that in the end of it all, we will not find a value of these principles as individuals, as individual organizations, and this will not make the vast difference that we are hoping it's going to make when we leave this place. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, moderator. I am Tokunbo Lijadu Oyemade, representing Kings of Africa for Development and Reintegration. And I'm based in Abuja, Nigeria. My observation about the Istanbul Principles are that they are the Bible and the Quran of the operations of civil society. But to the extent that we have to be guided by the provisions and then maybe eventually on the field improve upon them. But what I have observed for the government of Nigeria in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, which we are trying to carry along with the work of CSOs, there is a special advisor to the president, and a high-level committee has been put in place in Nigeria by government. It includes civil society. But what I know is that during the meeting of that particular body, no mention was made of the Istanbul Principles, which shows that there is a gap. If you have rules for operating in an environment, and you are operating without those rules, a lot of people don't know, as far as Nigeria is concerned, about the Istanbul Principles. I think what we need to go back home and do, what we do for my NGO, Nigeria is divided into 6 geopolitical zones, which we are trying to turn into 6 geo-economic zones for us to be able to address some of the concerns of the SDGs. But we do need to allow the rural-based and the city-based civil society organizations to know what to be guided by. So what I am thinking as I'm listening to everybody speak in this room is that what we need to go back to do as civil societies is to really disseminate the Istanbul Principles and ensure that every civil society is aware of what is expected of them. We may be part of what government creates, but we need to be able to guide government in order for us to operate on a level playing field. You know, that's just the intervention I want to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
So can we comment on?
We'll add 2 others. 3.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. My name is Dalitso Kubalasa from Malawi. I'm the CPDE focal point in Malawi. I just wanted to comment, talking about implementation, because we see a lot of color frameworks called by different names, and sometimes they can be confusing. I remember one time I had a very long interview with one journalist who was saying, sometimes these things, they're very confusing. You're talking of Istanbul Principles, you're talking of Nairobi, you're talking of Busan, you're talking of Mexico. What is this? I mean, you're talking of SDGs and the like. So I think as we're talking about disseminating and making sure that we follow through with the outcomes, I think it all boils down to how well the forward and backward linkages are really understood. And I think this is our role as civil society. Somebody was saying, you know, before we called them all these names, I think we've been doing them. And I think what the frameworks like the Istanbul Principles and everything else are doing, they're helping us put things into the proper perspective so that we all follow. And I think this is where it's very, very important. Let's connect the dots, what the Istanbul Principles, how they relate with what we've been doing and how they relate with the national development plans and all these SDGs at the global level and everything like that. In Malawi, I think this is, you know, what we're going back to the basics. So as civil society, as government, all of us are simply wearing different hats. A hat called government, a hat called civil society, a hat called media, but all of us are pushing for the development results. And this is the question that we're saying. These Istanbul Principles are helping us, you know, break it down and follow bit by bit so that we see the means or the end that we want to see. So I just thought I could add this as well, talking about implementation that should really take us to the development results that we want to see. Thank you.
Thank you.
There have been plenty of feedbacks from the floor. One, I think I'll answer it this way. We'll have to realize that CSOs are not homogeneous. I mean, there is uneven development among CSOs. Probably others are more capacitated as far as ensuring women's rights and children's rights. Others are probably better in developing partnerships or solidarity. So there's uneven development, but that's not to say that CSOs are not implementing Istanbul principles. And I would agree that this should be reflected in our ways of operations. I've seen some organizations that have tried to incorporate in their constitution, what do you call this, bylaws and these organizational documents, these principles as far as ensuring that there should be more than 50% women in leadership, ensuring that in decision making everything is done collectively. So these are done at the highest policy making bodies of those CSOs. But as I've mentioned earlier, we should not really be confined. And in fact, as far as CPDE is concerned, we have been implementing seminars and trainings in relation to Istanbul principles. And like in Malaysia, which we just did 2 weeks ago, no? The participants of the training came out with sort of a guidelines or a pact among themselves on how they would implement Istanbul principles and how they would do this as far as engaging governments at the national level in relation to, you've mentioned about SDGs, somebody mentioned about national action plans. Probably 3 will be giving more recognition on CSOs being independent actors. So we were having discussion with MEJA that actually when we speak of Istanbul principles, it should not actually be delimiting. No, it should be able to empower us to be able to engage in different mechanisms, different fora, different actors, whether it at the highest level of government or what. Because at the end of the day, it is our participation, it is CSO or citizen or public participation through our organizations and organizations or associations that would lead to greater gains, even in calling for government and private sector to be more responsible and to be more accountable. Probably the last point. Since this morning, I've heard of comments from the different speakers in relation to internal accountability of CSOs. And there's always been the issue of corruption within. And even our keynote speaker, Secretary Tagiwalo, mentioned about we should be wary about corruption because, participating in international activities could be really be corrupting. I think if we're really guided by our mandate, we are clear of our mission of to whom we are accountable, that would actually be a guard against corruption within. We should never lose track of our mission. We should never lose track of whom we serve, because once we forget who we are accountable with, everything falls apart. As I've mentioned, we can come out with 1,001, 1,003 document or Istanbul principles, but if these are not implemented at heart and we are not committed to its implementation and improvement, because nothing is static also, it should be responsive. So if we need to enhance on it more, then we should be able to do it. I mean, it's useless. That's what I would say about the...
Thank you. Good to MEJA. You start, yeah, he prefers, yeah, and you will talk us about the initiatives.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the positive comments where you sought clarifications. I wish to start by mentioning that we've done well with the youth empowerment indicator, done well in terms of the very initial design and conceptualization. And I must say that we've involved the very top echelons of government, cabinet secretaries of treasury. The cabinet secretary is the minister for national treasury, the minister for planning, the minister for youth and women affairs, have been informed about the initiative. They've taken it up and supported our forming a joint technical team, which now would include non-government stakeholders. And so far we've had 2 or 3 meetings. And as we continue to build the traction, we are also inviting other stakeholders that we've left out. We also have the Youth Sector Working Group, which is domiciled at the Ministry of Youth, and they are helping us identify critical youth groups, which will make the relevant contributions to that. And also we are making reference to the African Agenda document, the Agenda 2063, just to build a regional traction before we escalate the whole indicator to the entire world. Now, thank you again for the comment on how implementation should be done. I agree with you that much as everything we spoke about in the outcome document is to be shared, there are specific commitments, specific principles which should be followed again by specific stakeholders. So going through, you will notice we try to disaggregate each of those principles by who is supposed to take what action. So using the action plan, we hope that moving forward we'll be able to give specific timelines and perhaps also the other resources that are needed. Now, a comment from my sister here from Nigeria, guiding government. Yes, actually this is very good, and unfortunately we sat together here, but my brother here really guides the government a lot when it comes to civil society engagement on effective development matters. He guides the government informally, he guides the government formally. Now when the civil society, what I'm saying is, has an issue, you should identify government, the correct government agencies, departments to raise the issue with. You can be sure we are all concerned, we are committed to achieving the Agenda 2030. The Agenda 2030 being a multi-stakeholder in its own approach. I mean, there's no way we'll leave other stakeholders by the side and pretend that we will achieve as much. And so Regina also to still expound on what I've said regarding enabling environment. In Kenya, we do have, currently we call it the aid structure, the aid architecture, but we are looking at changing the name to development cooperation structure, and that is the way which we engage with different stakeholders. So through that, like when we had the second monitoring round, we had a discussion, a consultation forum, a multi-again stakeholder consultation forum on Indicator 2, creating an enabling environment. So here we came together as government. We also were working with the CSOs and other development partners to really look at the answers that had been given, the responses that had been given, and assess if these are really the right position in Kenya. And where we found disparities, we also found a way of dealing with that. But we agreed as government to improve on the various areas which are not really contributing to enabling environment. And with involving the private sector, as my sister from Nicaragua here mentioned, again, this is a country specific. So in Kenya, again, using the aid architecture, we've been able to engage the private sector very well. And whenever there are issues related to development cooperation, whether at the policy level, whether at the technical level, we involve the private sector, and they are happy to contribute. The government of Kenya realizes that going forward, private sector has a very large, big role to play in achieving the Agenda 2030. So we are involving them in all development cooperation activities in Kenya. Thank you very much.
Thank you. MEJA?
Yeah, thank you. Don't worry, I'll not give another PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah. Fortunately.
No, but on the issue of enabling environment for countries in fragility, indeed we must say that environment gets more tougher for them. Because in most cases, the political environment is too violent and physically threatening. The financial sustainability elements also become very difficult for them. And in essence, the environment does not provide space to be able to exercise those mandates that the Nairobi outcome document has pointed out to in terms of the CSO responsibilities. And I think the commitment to address those by the governments need to be certainly be followed up on, and demand accountability from governments, because if they've committed to address the issue of shrinking space, then even if you're in fragility, you must really deploy sufficient resources, energies, and structures to bring about enabling environment. Because at the end of the day, actually, it's mostly civil society structures that are responsible for providing spaces for service provision, for counseling, and we have to enable them to do that. I think the other issue that I also wanted to raise has to do with the private sector in Nairobi outcome document. I think for the first time, private sector is also in the development effectiveness agenda, and they will be held accountable to the 4 principles, which is ownership, accountability, inclusive partnership, and results. And in that regard, if any private sector seeks blending finances, where they are supposed to use ODA, those principles will have to apply, and indeed, all the stakeholders are now empowered to hold private sector accountable to those principles. Lastly, because I see he wants to shut me up, has to do with the key question that we're asking ourselves. If we are independent development actors, then why the need to align to country result framework? And therein lies the problem. Because we said we want democratic ownership. And in democratic ownership, we are saying that citizens must be at the heart of planning, at the heart of implementation, and indeed at the heart of monitoring. And in that context, we are assuming that development plan is democratically owned. And so, if also as a country you agree on a result framework, here we're talking about result framework, that we should be able to say that in 5 years' time, we have built, the level of illiteracy has reduced by 50%, and we've constructed so many number of schools and employed so many number of teachers. That those CSOs who work in those sectors are also able to measure their input in that education sector in that country to have contributed certain elements of those results. I think that is what it means, but the challenge is about interpretation. And because we are leaving this at country level interpretation, that is what is bringing jittery among colleagues. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, is the issue of non-implementation that our colleague was raising. I think actually, with regard to development or aid effectiveness, this is the only global unit that has a monitoring framework that every country, after 2 years, must show. Yes, there's imbalances because actually the lot of transaction costs of monitoring lies with the partner countries, developing countries, and donors at the headquarters don't report or account for anything. That has to change. But in essence, in terms of where the rubber really meets the road, where the impact issues are felt, countries are bringing issues with regard to what is increasing their transaction cost and what is making them ineffective when it comes to development cooperation. And that's a plus. So I think what we need to work on is how do we improve, make it easy, reduce the burden of monitoring to deliver more in terms of results and impact at the country level. I think for me that is the most important component.
Thank you for making this clarification because I was waiting for this. Please, will you come with me? BEVERLY, MEJA, Collins. Vous ne les avez pas encore applaudis.